but we really didn't have the money to fund that first year of education. So I had to go out there and find my way. You have roller coasters many times in a week. So the one day you're absolutely fine, and the other day it's a nightmare. So the opportunity to change the world for good, and the environmental impact was something that really attracted me to ACUA Ocean. Power ocean-going drones, these surface vessels that stay on water and float on water, and they can be remotely operated. And the idea was that they are powered with liquid hydrogen, so they can stay out for much longer.
Welcome to the Bay HQ podcast, where we inspire, connect and guide the next generation of British Asian entrepreneurs. If you watch us on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure you leave us a 5-star review. Today we have with us Puneet Chhabra, who is the founder, ex-CTO of ACUA Ocean and Headlight AI. How are you doing today?
Very well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
So you've got such an interesting story, and I think you've got the coolest product we've ever had on this podcast. And I can't explain it myself, so I'm going to let you do that later on. But if we rewind, when you were growing up, did you ever think you'd get to where you are today? Did you ever think you'd be building your own businesses and doing such incredible, innovative work?
Definitely not building my own businesses. That was not something that I had thought of. But I think growing up, the furthest back I can go that really technology hit me was, I think when I was in grade 8, and I was sort of average student. I was not doing great at math, and I got introduced to sort of two sisters who were really hitting the peak of their careers, and I used to spend evenings with them, and they would basically give me math lessons. This was at a time where NASA was preparing 2 rovers that they wanted to sort of land on Mars, and one of them was called Spirit, the other one was Opportunity. So I was just finishing my A-levels, and looking just at the machinery and how they would basically land it was fascinating for me. At that point, that was something that really stuck in my head, that this is what I want to do. This was a time when we didn't have really laptops or PCs at home, but there was a mate of mine from school, and he had a Windows 95 PC. And I used to spend evenings with him playing Aladdin and also sort of accessing internet so that I could download books on robotics and kits, so I could basically start. So it was pretty clear to me that that's what I wanted to do. And what's interesting is but at that point, I would also sort of pin down the universities that I wanted to go to. But I would also pin down the potential companies that one day I would work for. And it's really funny because BAE Systems was on that list, and that's where I ended up after my master's, working for 4 years. So I didn't think I would ever start a business, but engineering and standing robots and building them was something that I was quite fascinated.
And when you went to university, because sometimes when you're a kid and you're really excited about something, and then you go to university and it's like, oh, this isn't quite what I thought. How did you find it? Because then it was went on to do a master's, you later on did a PhD. Was it everything you hoped it would be?
No. With circumstances, my dad decided to move into Punjab, and he basically settled there. There were riots and things like that, so he lost pretty much everything. So that was a turning point in our lives, because we were basically moving from one city to the other. So he decided that he wanted to go to the south and settle there. And 2 main reasons. One, obviously we had family connections and we had my aunts there. But the other main reason was that there's so much emphasis on engineering and education in the south, which is slightly different to what is in the north. So I can never stop thanking him for that decision, because I grew up in a place where STEM and math, physics, biology was like really, really, so you had to work hard and my day would start like 6:30 in the morning. I would get up, go out and prepare for the entrance exams, which I really didn't do that great at the start. So I was so excited that this is what I want to do, right? And this is why I had everything figured out. But when I actually started doing it, as in, I knew, okay, if I have to leave India and I have to go abroad to sort of get the best education in this niche space, I have to go through certain exams. I have to sort of, excel at it. But the process was very grueling. And at that point, I also was very good at some sports, and I think that was a distraction for me, because I would break out in the evenings and go out and play badminton. I did really, really well. I played under 16 for a while.
What's interesting there is a lot of people who do well in business later on, they have a sports background, because obviously it teaches you a lot as well. So maybe it was a distraction in some ways, but it's also helped you get to where you are today as well.
I think so. I think there was one thing that I really lack, and again looking back, is that proper discipline. But again, I was surrounded by by elders. I was surrounded by people that had discipline in their lives, and they've done so well. So if I would have just put my head and my time to badminton, maybe I would have excelled. But I think the distraction was sports became that excuse to sort of get away from these big books and these entrances. So I really didn't enjoy that. Somehow I did figure out a university which was not a state where I grew up. It was another state, another language, so this was in Tamil Nadu, where they speak Tamil. I grew up, I could understand Telugu and I could speak Telugu. But Tamil was completely different, right? So I had to leave home. So I went to university there, and the university there was sort of kind of day boarding, and I spent 4 years. I used to come back home every 6 months on vacation. So the journey was not that enjoyable. But when I got to the end of my bachelor's, I was like, yeah, the next thing I want to do is I want to reach out. I want to connect with people who are actually building things or doing robotic projects. And if that's taking them out in the real world, then that's where I want to go. So then that took me to the States, left, right, center, applying to big labs in the States. I got into two, but we really didn't have the money to sort of fund that first year of education. So I had to sort of go out there and find my way. So I met a guy, Anuj Sehgal. He was a really good guy, and he had a robotics society. And the idea was that we were going to compete in a US competition, which was funded by the US Navy. So I was like, okay, that's my way out, because I want to go out and do a real thing. So this was my first taste of building something. And I spent 6 months there building things from scratch, electronics and everything, mechanical. And we went into this competition, and there was a guy from Lockheed Martin. He looked at our robot and he was like, well, he pretty much laughed at it because it was $1,500, and we were competing with MITs and Cornells with 50 grand worth of robots. But he gave us some few tips, and I told him, look, this is my aspiration and this is what I want to do, and this is where I want to go and study. So he pointed me out to a scholarship, which was a European Union funded scholarship. And I applied for it, and that brought me to the UK. And after that, I was invited by BAE Systems to do my thesis. I spent 4 years there.
And when you got to BAE Systems, what was that thesis about? Like, what were you studying? What were you proving?
We were looking at autonomous vehicles. That was one of the big sort of R&D funded, and this was way before where autonomous vehicles were mainstream and widely tested, and Google was in it. But BAE was backed by a lot of R&D funding to solve this problem. So that was part of a big team. So there was 100, 200 engineers and scientists. My project was to help these vehicles navigate safely, especially on harsh terrain. Did reasonably well.
So that's really interesting. And obviously BAE is like a huge company that's very corporate. But then now what you're doing is so different, where you're now working at startups and you've created a few of your own. What was the idea that made you decide, actually, I want to do this myself, I want to build my own company? How did that happen?
A motivation came from my seniors and my managers at BAE Systems. So some of them were successful, postdoctoral candidates at big universities and come up with some blue sky ideas, and they would basically go out and pitch for funding. And that changed the world in a small way. That to me was very powerful. And I think the only thing I thought I could do that was actually excel and be a master, be an expert in a field. This is when I came across a project which was basically looking at carbon content in the environment using forest, using sort of optical sensors and lasers. And there was a lot of going on there. And by this time in my career, I was more focused on the software and how do you create AI, or how do you write software, intelligent software, to make these machines more intelligent. So I think that this was a really good transition. So I spent 5 years working on these technologies. So I was finishing my PhD, and entrepreneurs reached out to me and they said, we have a cohort that is starting. Have you ever thought of starting a company? Now the projects I was working on, or my research, obviously had a lot of applications: autonomous vehicles, remote sensing for, and carbon monitoring for the environment. And I was like, okay, maybe Entrepreneur First is an opportunity for me to find my co-founder, try out some ideas that I'm going to go out and pitch to investors.
Obviously, coming from an academic background is very different to working in a startup. When they approached you, was there any hesitation? Did you feel like maybe this isn't the right thing for me? Did you want to stay in academia for longer? How was that? How did you feel at that stage? Obviously, opportunity came along, like, I'm not sure, or this sounds great.
Leaving academia was difficult, but I could clearly see the opportunity. And I was fairly young in my career, and I was like, this is my chance to give this a go and try it out. So at first I said no to Entrepreneur First, and then one cohort went by, and thought, okay, I should probably give it this, another chance, because I knew that I was not really great at finance or some of the sort of fundraising side, and I definitely needed help there. But by then I was really very clear on the ideas and innovations. So I think this is why I decided, and I didn't really have like concrete ideas of this is what I'm going to build a business on. But this is where EF was really sort of exciting for me, because it's an exploration stage for 3 months that, you go out and try your ideas, and you get the support to sort of see if it really, you can take it forward.
How did you find the actual experience of being on that cohort? Was it like quite eye-opening? Did you meet interesting people? Because a lot of people might be listening right now thinking they might one day want to join that sort of cohort and learn from that way. Do you think that really helped you in your journey?
For sure. Since I've left EF, a lot of people have asked me about, how do you find your co-founder? Like, how did you decide on a co-founder? Because we were a group of 90 people. And a lot of talented people in the room. So I think it's about sort of really understanding where your strengths are and where are the holes and where are the gaps, and how would you complement it. Obviously, you want to be sure that you want to work, because you're building up a relationship with your co-founder. Then there has to be a personality. So that's something that's where they give you some time to sort of understand each other. And there are lots of exercises. So I think, you just have to go out and give it a go, but just be with an open mind.
What were some of the exercises that helped you pick your co-founders?
Similar to sort of speed dating, where you're sort of, telling them what your ideas are, telling them how would you change the world. There were a lot of sort of ice-breaking exercises, like in terms of games and roundtable exercises to get to know each other's strengths. But then very quickly, they usually you have to move to an idea and then explore. So you've got to be, one of the exercises we did was we had to pick 5 people that we think after a couple of weeks, we see them as a potential co-founder. Mm-hmm. But you have to attach that with at least 2 or 3 ideas, because, just pure the diversity and of the talent there. But also you have to be very clear when you get into it. It's like, do you want to be a CTO? Do you want to be the tech guy or be the CEO?
For people who don't understand what a CTO is, could you just give an idea about what your role is in these companies?
It's a chief technology officer. In my case, because of my fundamental research, a lot of the technology and a lot of the ideas, the innovations, strategizing in terms of, okay, how are we going to build a MVP or a minimal viable product? What does that look like? Which domains that you're going to basically tackle and take this product to. But then you need help. And this is where a CEO who's probably comes in from a finance or a business development or an industrial background, where they've seen problems, real world problems, and they solve those using technology. So again, as a CTO, you could be basically doing from technology roadmap, strategizing, team building, to a point where your CEO is actually out on the road fundraising. You're basically running the company, right? So that is a big task, and I've seen some really good examples of how sort of CTOs have actually done that and built some really large teams out. So bulk of it is about hiring and running the team behind the scenes.
And the first idea that you really took forwards and dove into, what was that? What was that first real product, MVP?
Because of my strengths and my research in terms of what I spent, we were targeting the autonomous vehicle space, because the bad weather, like these vehicles, they have to operate in bad weather. So we were basically looking at it, okay, how can we optimize these vehicles for bad weather? And that was one of my initial ideas that we actually took and we tested out. This was very early days, and one of the key lessons I learned was that you got to look at is it a hair on the fire problem for the end user? And a lot of times, there were other bigger problems that the AV and the robotics community was trying to solve. And this went on from infrastructure to big data to actually sort of AI perception. We tried this, we pitched these ideas internally to some of the VPs, and we didn't really succeed there. This was just before Christmas, and then me and my co-founder just sat down and was like, okay, we're gonna fail if you don't pivot. We came across an article in the paper that talked about how underground mines and underground environments are really sort of dangerous for men and women to actually work in. and technology and robots were being used in that space. So that kind of stuck in our head, and we suddenly started looking at technology that could go onto robots or drones that could be deployed and operated remotely, that would potentially sort of save lives, and they could be deployed. So we started looking at that space, and that was our pivoting point, where we focused a specific problem which hadn't seen innovation for quite a long time.
I love the phrase you used there earlier about the hair on fire problem. Because I think sometimes people have these bright ideas, but it's not a big enough problem for people to really want to pay for it. They think, oh, okay, yeah, that's a product, but will we actually make a difference with this? Is it worth me spending money on? Whereas what you pivoted to, obviously, that if it's saving lives, it's a huge difference. And in terms of your own motivation, when you're going through these different pivots, how did that change? Because obviously going from one idea which you think wasn't necessarily a hair on fire problem to the one where you're like, this product could save lives. How did that feel for you?
I think is in many ways it was very fulfilling. And now you just don't do that because you have a gut or a hunch. You have to test it out. And this is where joining an accelerator was a really eye-opener, because for me at least, because coming from academic backgrounds, it's all about sort of following a process of sort of looking at what was the prior art in that space, and then you figure out, okay, where are the gaps and how would you. So that systematic approach of trying to solve a problem is you could apply it to sort of any walk of life. But this idea of pivoting, we did the same thing. Like, we had to validate it. And there is a very interesting book called The Mum's Test. It's about asking the right questions about a product and then validating your assumptions. So we got to work and we started looking at, okay, how big is this a problem? Suddenly we realized, you have over like 500,000 kilometers worth of sort of underground infrastructure that needs to be monitored. So we started speaking the key personnel in this space, and we started sort of got on the phone with them and pitched them our idea, and suddenly we hone in on something that one of the customers said, if you could solve this, that's the holy grail of what we're trying to do. And that stuck with us, me and my founder, and we were like, okay, we're going to sort of focus on this. He went on to become our champion. It was reasonably a big utility company.
Was this Headlight AI as well?
Yeah. Headlight, yeah.
And obviously Headlight AI went for several years, and you're now non-executive director there, right? What was that journey like over those several years of going from the idea to then trying to scale it and then try to go further? Like, what were the emotions you went through? What did you learn from that? You
have roller coasters many times in a week. So the one day you're absolutely fine, and the other day it's a nightmare. So I think that those emotions, you got to be prepared to handle those. We learned a lot in terms of sort of how we build the team. There was a point we were a team of 12. We also had huge successes with grants, so with Innovate UK, and that was something that was one of my main roles within the business, also to sort of bring in some new ideas. And so I think the journeys were about, okay, how do we bring money in? So, and not just from VCs, but also through sort of grants. And some of the grants that we've had huge success with was actually working with a problem that the end user already had. So that was sort of a really sort of a great experience in terms of we knew that we were trying to solve a problem that, there is buy-in at the end. So we got to the point where fundraising was quite challenging, and you have to sort of think about, okay, how would you get around that? And this is where sorting, if you have a product, you got to sort your bread and butter out, so that at least keeps you going. And one of the things, looking back, I think we didn't do right was we were spread out, we were thin, and we were doing a lot of things. The other thing we were trying to do was we were trying to fix the product and make sure that it's 100%. At times, a product can work 75% of the times, and you have to be honest with the client, saying, look, it breaks down 25% of the times, but this is how we're going to monitor and fix it. But you got to sort of emphasize on the fact of, okay, let's do the business development and get the sales in, because then that's where the challenge comes, because if that doesn't happen, then you're struggling.
I think it's something a lot of perfectionists struggle with, right? It's like, if you want to get it absolutely perfect, but then sometimes, like you said, you need the validation, you need customers to use it, because if customers aren't using it, you don't actually know what the problems are. And you might be trying to fix this one tiny thing that customers don't actually care about. When they start using it, it's actually something smaller that is a bigger deal for them. And along that journey as well, you also had ACUA Ocean as well. So how did that come into it, and how did you manage those different roles and transitions?
Yeah, so ACUA Ocean is a really, really interesting company that was introduced to by a friend of mine. And the idea with ACUA Ocean was power ocean-going drones, these surface vessels that stay on water and float on water, and they can be remotely operated. And the idea was that they are powered with liquid hydrogen, so they can stay out for much longer. And the attraction there was purely from the point of view of monitoring the environment and collecting data. So these platforms are Internet of Things, and they've got devices, they've got sensors, and they're collecting that data. So from a technical point of view, that was very exciting challenge for me, because how do you solve it? How do you sort of get these out and safely and operate them safely? So, but the environmental impact and the opportunities to change the world for good was something that really attracted me to ACUA Ocean. But the other really attractive part was the founders. So my other founders were, one of them was an expert in the drone space for oceans, and my other founder was an expert on marketing and business development. So I was like, okay, there's a lot I can learn from them.
Can you just talk a bit more about how ACUA Ocean will change the world as it scales? What's the impact it's going to make? Why does it excite you so much?
It's very expensive to have really large patrol vessels that protect a certain sort of region. You could also think of marine protected areas, which are where you're sort of protecting those areas because you have illegal fishing going on. So right now, the only way to protect those areas, or even to protect the borders of some countries, is have sort of big frigates and big ships, and these are all diesel powered. So they now more than 90% of these vessels out there are diesel powered. So they have a huge impact on global emissions. So we are approaching this is just have these vessels which are powered by liquid hydrogen, and they can be out there for over 60 days. So they've got a lot of power, plenty of power on board to sort of support big sensors. They can be remotely operated, so you're taking the crew out. So it's safer. And for the cost of a big frigate, you could have sort of hundreds of these out there protecting and collecting data, ocean data, that then helps you quantify how much carbon we are capturing and helps in reducing the emissions.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm just thinking about that's how, because obviously a lot of people here would have watched Blue Planet and things like that, where you see how the impact society is and the human population is having on the world, and all the fishing problems and overfishing. And it's just, even I'm getting the mental image in my head of all these unmanned vessels just floating around, and let's say there is somebody trying to poach, then I guess it would trigger an alarm, and then there could then people deal with it. How does that work? How would that patrolling?
Yeah, I think it's you've hit it spot on in terms of illegal fishing being a a massive problem. I think this is why there are several aspects to this technology. There's remote operations, there's autonomy, but there's also these vessels have to be safe to be out there for over 60 days or 70 days. There has been such vessels which are powered through solar, through wind, and you have different classes of these vessels, so they carry different types of sensors underwater. But if you're looking at an example, so for example, if you look at the Scandinavian region where they're trying to build massive offshore wind farms, they spread over 100 square kilometers. Now, if you want to protect and sort of survey those regions, you need continuous presence, and this is where you cannot have manned or crewed vessels out there which are basically running on diesel out there sort of patrolling and protecting those waters. So I think the impact is huge. You have countries that are coming together trying to build the green corridors. You've got one between sort of Norway and Scotland, and then towards Canada. So the idea there is how can we leverage and how can we use alternative fuels to look at creating this next generation of vessels. And obviously you have the remote operations and AI and autonomous capabilities that are maturing as well. So this was also one of the reasons why this ACUA Ocean was such an interesting project to take on, was because of you are basically looking at mega trends coming together, like AI, Internet of Things, hydrogen technology. I think that was one of my main sort of pulls towards ACUA Ocean.
I'm thinking that you mentioned about a hair on fire problem earlier, and it's almost like ACUA Ocean is solving a world on fire problem, right? This is a huge problem for everybody and a society. So I guess even with the clients who's going to be using this, it could be governments, it could be big organizations, it could be charities, non-profits. And I guess that's different to who was using your previous technology as well, right? And what do you think that the experience at Headlight AI taught you about business that helped you go into ACUA Ocean and make fewer mistakes?
One of the things that we also learned at Headlight, which was in many ways out of our control, was you could have really a good technological innovation. If you don't bring in business innovation, you're struggling. And what I mean by that is, sometimes it's not just about taking your best technology to your clients and saying, look, we've created, this amazing thing. Sometimes it scares them. I'll give you an example. It's early in the development of our version 2 of our product at Headlight. So we developed Telesto, which is a prime product, which has got multiple sensors and some laser scanners. And we basically get the data, we push the data to the cloud, and out comes a really structural report. Where are the defects, where are the problems? But we also locate these assets, because that is something that has never been done, especially at long distances. So if you're a construction company and you want to build something in brownfield or greenfield, wherever, and you want to know what's down there, most of the times you actually go to the asset owner and you say, look, can you tell me what's down there? And sometimes all they bring back to you are as-built maps. Now, they are as accurate as somebody could just draw them. So most of the times they don't know what's really down there. And that's a big problem. So we honed in on that, because that was our holy grail. And that was told to us that large assets, which are running for long distances, nobody knows where they are. So we tried to solve that problem where there was a bit of autonomy. But when you took the technological solution to the client, most of the times they were scared, just looking at, and they thought this is probably going to put them out of job. So you see, you have to tackle that cultural element of how do you make that sale. And that was very tricky. That was very challenging. How do you bring that change? Sometimes we provided them with analytics and information that they didn't want to know. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of sort of senior executives who were like, okay, not on my watch. And I don't want to know that something is this wrong. Mm-hmm. And then we came back scratching our heads in terms of, okay, how do you tackle this? One thing we learned, and this helped me when I joined ACUA. This is where I learned at ACUA, was you probably do that through articles and very sort of dedicated marketing campaigns and mm-hmm. thought leadership and sort of those. So I think that was something that was quite unknown to me at Headlights, which I really learned at ACUA.
And has that been working effectively at ACUA?
It has been working relatively well in terms of making the clients more aware of that. Yeah, we've got the experts and we're working with the experts, and we know what we're doing.
When we talked earlier as well, you said about how you wanted to show the realities of entrepreneurship and how it's not always like sunshine and rainbows. What are some of the harder moments you've had, and how did you get through those?
There's a mix of things, and it basically tests your personality and your character. Obviously, you'll have fallouts with the team, and you'll have fallouts with your co-founders. But you have to just remember what the end goal is, and if the end goal is the success of the business, and I think for me that kept me going. And the hardest part was we grew a team to the point where we built some really cool product out, but there was a point in the business where we could no longer sustain a team. Tempting to think like, okay, I'm going to basically grow my team very, very quickly. But you also have to think about, okay, you'll have to let people go. There's a lot of dark times in terms of making those decisions. We were spreading ourselves too thin. And that was because we were already serving a client, right? And we didn't really have a year-by-year recurring contract with them. But we also had another potential client, which was in a completely different domain, right? And then we were doing grants at the same time. And we had taken on those grants and we were successful with them. So that meant that we had to grow our team. So we changed our gears and we were like, okay, all fronts, like let's go. And some of those grants were so focused on the product, but they were not 100% focused on the product, because we took on this new client which came with their own requirements. And I think that was a mistake. If you're hiring and if you're taking on other projects, it has to be focused to the core product that you're trying to build. And yeah, and then make sure that product is out there and the revenue that could actually sustain your team. Because if you can't get to the product, you can't improve the product, then you will struggle with fundraising.
So what are you working on now? Like, what can people who are listening to this right now be thinking, what are you coming out in the future? What should they be paying attention to?
The project I'm working on now is actually looking at capturing methane and carbon content from the environment using optical sensors, accurately measure them, map them out, pinpoint them. And this is a big problem in the oil and gas sector. And it also links to the ACUA Ocean project, because you've got the vessels which are out there. So this project is about refining the software and creating this laser camera that allows you to capture and pinpoint where the leaks are, and with the environment, what happens with how quickly these leaks can spread. This is a big problem in the oil and gas space, or big industrial sites where you can't see those leaks, and they keep building up over time, and suddenly, boom, there is an accident or a hazard. So there are technologies out there which are using camera systems and sort of to capture them. So this is a really interesting problem. Again, this project which is something that I'm taking up, which has got a solution of this problem, has got an impact, in improving and changing the world.
Part of this role is getting some stability as well, right? And how is that in terms of mental decisions to decide, okay, I'm going to take on this role? What's great, I guess, is that it's also aligned with your values so much, right? It's that problem you're going to try and solve, that's saving lives, protecting the environment. Was it a difficult decision to make, or how did you come to, I'm going to take on this project too? It
was hugely influenced by circumstances, and obviously I've been doing startups for a few years, and not every startup is going to succeed. I mean, many of them fail. I think I wouldn't consider Headlights to be a failure in that sense. We've created products and we've won awards for those products. There are utilities that use those products even today. ACUA is a continual long-running project, and I'm still involved with it. This is going to bring stability to what I really want. I think once you've got that itch of setting up a business and then going out and testing your ideas, you probably will come back to it, and I would. So I think one day I would probably come back and do this all over again. But right now, it's about sort of making sure that I've got the stability and the project and the technology I'm working on is something that I've been working on for years. So that was an easy decision.
I think one of the important things as well for people listening is that when you start your own startups and you create your own businesses, you can always go back and get that more stable role if you want to. And the skills you learn from your startups make you more valuable in that space too. So it's something to really pay attention to. Your company that you built was so innovative and doing so many incredible things, but it doesn't mean you can't also do that for a larger company or work with them and have that stability. So I think sometimes think you're either an entrepreneur and you're working on your own business, or you're work the 9 to 5, but you can do both, and it's all about your different circumstances at different points of your life. I think it's really important to show that as well, where some people are like, oh, quit your job and be forever an entrepreneur. It depends on your life and depends on your circumstances. So I'm happy that you found that stability you need right now. So we're going to have to move on to quick fire questions. So the first one is, who are 3 British Asians you'd like to shout out because you think they're doing amazing work?
One would be Lopa Patel, and she's doing some really, really great work in bringing Asians together. So I think I would definitely give her a shout out. The other person is Dave Amartya. He's co-founder of a company called Nplan. Been quite motivated in terms of what he's done and how he's built his company, and he's also been an AI advisor for the government in the past. So his journey and how he's set up his company and with his founder is quite inspiring. Third person, I would like to mention my wife. She's Kritika Chhabra, and she works for a law firm. She's a designer, and I mean she's been an inspiration in terms of sort of supporting me through my PhD years and through my startups. So yeah, I'll give her a shout out.
Okay, we usually say that it's cheating to shout out your spouse, and unless she has a business that people can follow, but I'll let you off this time because of our time. The next question is, if people are listening right now and they want to reach out to you for support or for guidance, what should they reach out to you about? If
they want to sort of get into sort of how you want to start a company or how they've got ideas that they want to validate, I'm there to support. I think one of my core strengths also is on validating some of their sort of ideas, and they're looking at pivoting, so I'll be there. Grants is something that reach out to me. I've been very successful with some of them, so I'd be more than happy to sort of support them. So they're companies that are actually...
Is there anything you're looking for support with at the moment? What could somebody in the audience potentially help you with?
I think I'm looking throughout my network, and if somebody could help in terms of organising the days and sort of get into more discipline, both physically and sort of organising work and things like that. So that would be something I'd be really looking forward to.
So it's been really enjoyable to talk to you today. I've really loved it. Have you got any final words for the audience?
If you have an idea and then really feel that you haven't got the confidence to go, you would never find out until you actually go out and try it. So it's always be brave, go out and try it, but have a safety net, and that could be your education or a job that you can always fall back to, or a skill that you could fall back to.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for listening. It means a huge amount to us, and we don't think you realise how important you are, because if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, if you leave us a 5-star review, it makes a world of difference. And if you believe in what we're trying to do here, to inspire, connect and guide the next generation of British Asians, if you do those things, you can help us achieve that mission, and you can help us make a bigger impact. And by doing that, it means we can get bigger guests, we can host more events, we can do more for the community. So you can play a huge part. So thank you so much for supporting us.